Well, as the unprecedented moments continue to pile up, this U.S. presidential election might be one of the hardest to predict. One professor, though, has correctly predicted the outcomes of 9 of the last 10 presidential elections, all by using his system that he calls the keys to the White House. The 13 keys, they range from the state of economy and success in foreign affairs to party mandate and the lack of a significant third-party campaign. And if 6 or more of those go against the White House, then they lose. So what does a change like all of this mean? Allan Lichtman is a professor at American University, and he joins me now. Professor Lichtman, it's good to see you, sir. Thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure.
Okay, you study U.S. elections. You predict U.S. election outcomes with great accuracy. What is your sense of the state of this race with everything that has happened in the last 24 hours?
Yes, first of all, let me say, take all the pronouncements of the pundits and the journalists and the operatives and the politicians and do with it what the great British philosopher David Hume said you should do to works of superstition. Consign that material to the flames. They have no scientific basis for any of their predictions. But I feel I can speak with some authority because I do have a 40-year track record of successful prediction through my keys to the White House, which are different from the polls and the pundits because the keys gauge the strength and weakness of the White House party, which is the propositions on which elections turn. And the way it works, I have 13 key questions. If 6 or more go against the White House party, they are predicted losers, otherwise predicted winners.
Right.
By forcing,
No, go ahead. I was going to say, there's some of those, just their party mandate, primary contest, strength of the economy, third party, just to give people an idea of what those 13 keys would be. How does the math work out right now when you look at the state of play, sir?
Yeah, I also have keys pertaining to social unrest, scandal, policy change, foreign policy successes and failures, and only 2 keys that have anything to do with the candidates, and they're very high threshold keys, asking if the candidates are once-in-a-generation inspirational candidates like FDR or Ronald Reagan. So here's where the keys stand right now, depending in part on what Democrats do. Right now, let's assume Kamala Harris is the consensus nominee and there's no big party battle. The Democrats are down 3 keys. The mandate key, because they lost U.S. House elections in 2022, and the incumbent charisma key, because Harris is not an FDR, and of course now the incumbency key, because Biden isn't running. That means 3 more keys would have to fall to predict their defeat. And here are the 4 shaky keys that you should be looking at. Third party. Will RFK Jr. stabilize at least at 10% in the polls? Social unrest. Will there be a big explosion of social unrest at the Democratic convention like we saw in 1968? And foreign/military failure and success, depending upon what happens in the wars in Gaza and in Ukraine. Now, if the Democrats are foolish enough, like the Washington Post editorial board has misguidedly suggested, that they should open up the convention and have a big party battle, that would cost them another key, the contest key, and that means only 2 of the 4 uncertain keys would have to fall. Moreover, outside of the key, since 1900, the White House party has never, I repeat, never been reelected when there is an open seat with no incumbent running and a major party contest. And that's what a lot of misguided critics are trying to push the Democratic Party into, in effect, recreating the same conditions of 2016 that led to the election of Donald Trump in the first place.
Okay, so based on what we have seen in polls and based on what you're saying when you look at your 13 keys, which have been stunningly accurate in their predictions, that if they don't rally behind Kamala Harris, a narrow path gets even more narrow. That you said it was foolhardy nonsense to get rid of Biden. Now you've said it's insanity if they fight Harris. So they've got to rally behind her right away, and even then, it's still a tight path to victory. Am I understanding that correctly?
It's not a bad path for victory if they at least preserve the contest key. Remember, 3 of the 4 shaky keys would have to fall to predict the Democrats' defeat. That's possible, but not highly likely. But if they forfeit both the incumbency key by forcing out Biden and then foolishly have a big party fight, then indeed their path becomes very narrow. Only 2 more keys of the 4 shaky keys would have to fall to predict their defeat. You know, the Democrats should be on notice. Do not snatch defeat out of the jaws of possible victory.
Well, all the big names in the Democratic Party who would be considered as possible rivals for Kamala Harris for the top of the ticket seem to be lining up behind her. So it seems like the rivals are on board and are sort of following the wise path that you are spelling out, that she needs to be the person. But I wonder, Professor, we're 30 days to their convention, give or take, about 106 days to the election. And in the last 8 days, we've had an assassination attempt on one nominee, and we've had the bowing out of a second nominee. I mean, and that's the incumbent. I mean, does that sort of volatility just, I'm not doubting your keys, but have you ever had to apply them to an election cycle, anything close to this?
Well, the keys are the Northern Star. They remain fixed. Now, every 4 years, someone tells me, you've got to change your keys. This is an extraordinary election without precedent. We have an African-American running for the first time ever. The nation is not ready to elect an African-American. We have a woman running. We have social media. We have the Access Hollywood tape. You name it. As the great comedian Rosanna Dana once said, there's always something, and you can't change a model on the fly. That's a recipe for error. Plus, the keys are very robust. Predictively, they go back to 1984, and retrospectively, back to the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860, when women couldn't vote, African Americans were mostly enslaved. We had no automobiles, no jet planes, no poles, no radio, no television. So the keys have endured enormous changes in our society, our demography, our economy, and our politics. That's why another reason I don't change them on the fly. But let me say this, I'm not so arrogant to say that even though the patterns have held for 160 years, they would hold indefinitely. I'm not psychic Gene Dixon with a crystal ball. I'm not Speaker Mike Johnson, who, if you heard him at the convention, thinks the Almighty talks to him and tells him what we all should do. I'm an historian. And sure, it is not impossible that something so cataclysmic and unprecedented could occur to break the pattern of history. But the problem is you won't know until afterwards. You can't say in advance whether it's an African-American running or a woman running or Biden stepping down or a near assassination attempt. That's going to change the pattern. That's why I stick with the keys and I stand on my 40-year record.
So just one last question, Professor, before we let you go.
Sure.
The conventional wisdom in Democratic circles seems to be that by Biden stepping down, they've improved their chances, just because of what they were seeing with low propensity voters, black voters, Hispanic voters, young voters, the lack of enthusiasm, people are moving away, and that Kamala Harris raises their ceiling. Would you agree with that assessment, based on the work you've done? Have they put themselves on a better path, potentially, with this change, do you think?
I don't agree with that. Again, that's sports talk radio. There was no track record of predicting elections by trying to piece together all of this polling data. Polling data, it's snapshots. It's not predictors. It's abused as predictions. Based on the polls, everyone wrote, not everyone, but almost everyone wrote off Donald Trump in 2016. They wrote off Barack Obama after his disastrous first debate with Romney, when only 20% in the CNN poll thought he won, compared to 33% who thought Biden won. They wrote off George H.W. Bush when he fell 17 points behind Mike Dukakis in June of the election year. Based on my keys, which do have a record, the Democrats are in a slightly worse position, but could salvage a lot with a consensus behind Harris.
So just, I know I said last question, but I lied. I have one more. You say if 6 or more are false, of your 13 keys, how many falses do they have right now if Kamala Harris, as presumed, is the nominee? Are they at 6 or are they below?
If she's the consensus nominee, they're down 3.
Okay.
Mandate based on midterms, incumbent charisma, and incumbency. So of my 4 undecided shaky keys, 3 would have to fall to predict their defeat.
Okay. Professor Allan Lichtman, we appreciate the time, and I'm going to be assessing everything by these 13 keys between now and November 5th. Thank you for your time today, sir.
My great pleasure. Take care.